Hi guys, welcome back to Tat-Stories. Katie Kaz here. I am so excited to talk to you guys during this episode of Blu Coller Ink because we have a very special guest who has graced us with her time and has offered to talk to us about one of the most requested topics we've heard from you guys, which is tattoo removal. So whether you have already had a tattoo removed at some point in your life, or if you're considering removing a tattoo for whatever, we brought in someone who actually does this for a living, and she has a clinical background, is going to tell us all about her experience, tips and tricks, any other advice or questions that you guys have brought to us. So I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Christina. Christina, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I have probably 1,000,001 questions for you, but we'll start with the basics. What is your background clinically, and then how did you actually get into tattoo removal and that whole business?
Well, I became a nurse in 1996. I got my bachelor's degree in that and worked around the industry I did step down ICU, and then from there went into workers' comp, being a case manager. Mm-hmm. And then after that, took time off with my children, having children, and then all of a sudden I get the call from a doctor I used to work with whose son made a bad choice with a really bad tattoo on his back. And the doctor said, hey, I want to buy this laser and I need a nurse. How about you? I'd love to have you on my team. So been doing it ever since.
Cool. Talk about a dedicated dad. You come back with a bad tattoo and your dad's not like, oh, you're not getting grounded. I'm actually going to buy a whole machine to get this off you. Do you mind if I ask what the tattoo was? Are you allowed to say?
Oh, yeah. It had a really strong, like, Edwardian font that said, live fast, die young, or something really bad like that. And he was in his early 20s, and his dad's a spinal surgeon, and I know him very well. And he's like, son. And so it was great because as we were moving it at not a fast pace, nice and easy, and we got to show clients the process. So
very cool.
And I knew him since he was a baby, so that was cool.
That's very cool. And I'm sure as a parent, live fast, die young is not a quote that you want to see on your child. So can't blame the doctor there for wanting to help his son out. So for those of our Tattoo Stories followers, myself included, who don't know a lot about the removal process, can you talk about the basics of like what sort of equipment do you need? My understanding is it's done by a laser, but the only lasers I know are at EDM music festivals, which I don't think is your process. So tell us a little bit about like what equipment you use and what the process looks like.
Lasers are awesome. The technology is changing so much. The technology that I recommend, so 15 years ago, we had the Q-switch laser. Mm-hmm. And that laser, you hear of like people coming out of prison, they have those programs. It's way more cost effective because it's been around for so long. But with those lasers, they take longer and you have to worry about thermal damage to your skin.
Got it.
And so it's the same process. Believe it or not, people don't know. You have to wait 6 to 8 weeks between treatments because you are in effect, it is burning your skin, but these lasers look for color. And so there's different depths to the laser too, but the Pico technology hits at, I think, 1,000th of a second faster. So you have more photoacoustic effect is what they call it, so less thermal damage. So you can be more aggressive with the laser and you have way less damage to the skin with the same amount of time. I don't know if I answered that question.
Yeah, no,
I could go
absolutely.
into real detail about it, but it's incredible technology, the Pico Way laser.
Well, and I think a big question on that too that you mentioned, so I didn't even know that the lasers look for like different colors, you're saying. Is there a different laser you should use if you have black versus like red ink you're trying to remove, or how does that work?
Yes. So our laser alone has 3 wavelengths. So there's one that hits, we call it the 1064 nanometer. That's like black ink, and it's usually the deepest in the skin. Then you have another wavelength that a lot of offices don't have, which is the 785 nanometer and the 755 nanometer, which those colors are more blues, purples, greens. And you'll see a lot of places that have the Q-switch laser that people are walking around with blue and green left on their purple left on their tattoos because that wavelength a lot of places don't have. Then you have the 532 wavelength, which I call it a warmer palette, which is oranges, reds, and browns.
Got it.
Color is always more challenging. Black, if I could give advice on if you want to start out with a tattoo, what you do first, because it comes off the way it was put into. So there are other factors related to ink removal.
That's so interesting. Yeah. So is it particularly difficult if someone comes in, let's say with a sleeve, and it's some sort of like color mural and it's all mixed together? Like I can't imagine that's like probably like like taking apart a puzzle and trying to like find each piece. Like, does that add time to the procedure?
Yes. It's way more complicated. There's two factors there. You've got an artist and their style. So you've got heavy-handed, like bright, what do you call it, like the older traditional tattoos that have like the deep reds and the deep greens. That style is, the ink's put in a lot thicker. Then you've got more of that beautiful, like airbrushed arm work. I love seeing the work.
So
That's
pretty.
The favorite part of my job is seeing all these beautiful pieces. You've got old stuff and new stuff and techniques. So if it was put on with a thicker style, it's going to take much longer to come out. A lighter style will take less time, but color is always a challenge. And there's one factor for that, which is oxidized ink. So anytime you have like a light pink or a light green, there's usually a white ink mixed in with it, which is what's in your sunscreen and paint, which is a zinc oxide, a titanium dioxide, and that is a metal. So when laser is still heat, when it hits it, it can oxidize to like a dingier blue, or some people see like a rust color, but that you have to be really patient with that, because if your artist really packed it in like a darker skin type, an artist told me once it was like tattooing on like tinted glass. So they're going to pack more color in there till they physically see it. So if you're going at a person also with colored inks, a big factor is the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. Anytime you deal with colored inks, you're going to want to look at the color of their skin, and we skin type immediately. So we skin type by the Fitzpatrick scale. So a darker the skin, sometimes some places will not touch colored ink in a dark skin type.
Wow.
Because you don't want to mess with the pigment of their skin. And that laser sits higher up where your melanocytes are in your skin, versus the 1064 is the safest laser and wavelength, because with a darker, like African American, like in San Diego, we have all skin type 5, 6s and 4s. And 4s, like, your Pacific Islander, all those. That's the safest laser, is the 1064 with black ink. But anytime you have color, you have to really assess the patient and the client and whatever color's in there.
Yeah, that's about 24 more factors than I thought had to go into laser tattoo removal. Yep. And this might be a dumb question, but if there's any of our Tat Stories followers who are maybe like completely new to this process, when you're using the laser, is it literally just burning the layer of your skin off until it gets to where the ink lives? Or like, how is it actually removing that color from your body? Do we want to know?
No, it's good. That's good, because that's what sometimes it can look like. Mm-hmm. And what really is, the laser will look through your epidermis, and you'll go into like where the ink is. And the ink literally typically sits in between your dermis and your epidermis. Yep. That's the place it's supposed to be. But as you can see, some are really deep, and you'll see blown out lines sometimes. You'll see like it looks really deep. So we always start with your deepest layer first. So understanding in laser language, we have a spot size, and we start with a larger spot size, like 6 millimeter. It's hard for you to understand, but we will start with the deepest layer first and then work our way up. You're not burning the skin, but another thing people don't get is the more ink you have in that space, the stronger the laser is going to react. Oh. So you will have a stronger reaction with that ink.
Got it.
So we got to worry about the skin's response. So initially, we're going to start with a lighter energy and a bigger spot size and work our way up. And it takes time. You have to wait 8 weeks, because sometimes people will have a strong reaction, because we don't know what the artist did. We don't know how much ink is in that layer. Right. We're waiting for a delayed response. Like it's common to blister, and we have to let people know that. But you got to be really careful with any reds or pinks. Those are the ones that really can be the most concerning if you have someone that really doesn't know what they're doing. Yeah. Which makes me feel better, because I only have black and gray. So I don't have to worry about reds or pinks. Hopefully also I don't have any tattoos I intend on removing. Yeah. But based on what you're saying, I mean, it sounds like it is such a science in terms of like the detail and the precision you have to have in order to really successfully take this out. So what I would have to imagine then is there's got to be some sort of like clinical background, or I don't know if there's a certification. Like what is the background with the people that you work with and yourself in order to be able to do this successfully? I'm very glad you asked that question.
I aim to please. You're welcome.
This is a big question you all need to know, since I am not currently working with a facility. I just stopped. I've learned something, and that is there's only 4 states in the U.S. that you have to be a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse to work this laser. You can go to Arizona or other states, and you can just go to a school that someone set up for you to learn for 2 weeks, and you're working this laser.
Oh my gosh.
So that kind of like, that kind of woke me up a little bit because there's so much science. And the other big thing about this laser, it has a handpiece for facial rejuvenation and tightening. So a lot of offices and practices, they use this laser for faces and they don't focus on tattoo removal. There might only be a 5 or 10% group of clients that are doing tattoo removal, and there's a big science to this.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What the ink's going to do, what the skin's going to do. I've caught people that are immunosuppressed and their bodies are responding different. I think you need someone that has a medical background, or the company that I was working for, they're going to be huge. They're going to be all over the world with their locations. They're very strict with their education and parameters. So, they've got education every month, and they have a special protocol that they follow that I think is really important, versus a doctor can get a laser and they'll have somebody, a tech working it, going, here you go, have at it. And, that could be dangerous.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I think in the same regard too, we've interviewed a lot of people at Tat-Stories who have had, I got this, piece done by an artist who's worked for 20 years. He's sponsored by, ink companies. He's certified in various things. And then we have people who are like, I went to my friend's garage and he had a broken pen and some ink and a hammer. And like in the same regard, it's like you really want to make sure you're like vetting who's doing this and operating this whole procedure.
But I can speak to that because I love dealing with some clients that have it, the ones that are usually done in someone's garage.
Yeah.
They're unprofessional. I've seen two ends of it. I've seen people that are not putting the ink like evenly dispersed in the skin where it comes out really nice. But then I've had some coming out of prison that are doing burnt chest pieces, like in their foreheads. That some of that does not come out, but we can definitely, either way, it will definitely be better than it was.
Yeah.
But
because it probably wasn't good to begin with.
Right.
And it kind of makes your job easier. It's like, well, if it's really close to the surface and it's not that much concentration of ink, you're like just kind of taking it out quickly.
But we don't know until I usually tell a client, like, let me see what happens first treatment. And I can talk a lot about, okay, this is definitely deeper. I can say this is what we're in for.
Yeah. And that actually brings up a good point that I was going to ask you is, are there any warning signs that you have to look for? So let's say you start your first treatment. Is there anything that's a red flag to you, like, oh, this is not going right? Or you mentioned like people who might not even know they're immunosuppressant, like does their skin react?
Yes.
Or like, what do you look for?
That's a loaded question too. Parts of the body that you have it done in, like this part of your skin is much thinner. So you have to be a lot more careful, especially if there's color there. Anywhere where your skin's tighter, the ankles, like red ink on the ankles, your lower back. That's another pain question too. Everybody asks me is where does it hurt the most?
Yeah.
That's a whole other question. What was the question again? Because I could go off into two different
No, you're
tangents.
totally fine. I was asking, are there any like warning signs or anything that you would see in terms of like the skin or even when what the laser's doing that's like immediately like something's wrong,
Yes.
we got to stop the procedure?
So there's something that's also new in the market. Remember, our inks, they're not being watched by, they're not FDA approved.
Right. They're not regulated.
So they're not regulated. That's the word, regulated. So I had this beautiful, beautiful Hawaiian girl that was coming in town to get this. Another thing is if it's been touched up or doubled up, like I didn't like it and I got it fixed. That's double the ink. So you're laser removing a tattoo on a tattoo. So you're going to get double the response and the resistance.
Yeah, we actually have a Tat-Stories Blu Coller Ink episode that we've talk about tattoo cover-ups. And there's so many considerations with how to cover up a tattoo. One of the things that unfortunately works better for a cover-up or probably worse for your line of work is if you're covering something up, the darker, the blacker, it's better to cover up the old tattoo so the new one looks better. But then I'm sure that's like increasing the concentration of ink that you have to work through to get it off.
And you have some people are like, I didn't like it, I fixed it, now I really hate it, now I want it off.
Oh, God.
Or we've got one where you've got someone whose boyfriend had it put on and she broke up with him. She got back with him and had it put on again, and we have to get it off all over again. And that's heartbreaking.
Learn your lessons, people. Just think about some of these things first.
Yeah, that can take a couple of years. You know, that's another thing is how long it takes. I don't know if we're there. I don't know if I answered your other question.
No, you totally did. You totally did. We're loving this. Is way more than I knew about tattoo removal before I sat down with you.
That back of that beautiful girl. We discovered after I tried a couple wavelengths on her, because it was all color, of course, and she was a skin type 4 because she's Pacific Islander mixed with something else, and it wasn't budging after a couple treatments. And that told me that this is either going to be a really long process, I can't guarantee it, or there's something called metallic inks that is new, that's a newer ink, and it's got metal in it.
Yeah.
And it is much more resistant than the other inks out there.
Oh,
Inks are
gosh.
evolving, and the chemical structure and the way the laser's reacting is changing. So again, people don't know what they're putting in their bodies, and it's all a matter of what the laser can remove. So that was the metallic ink concern.
Yeah.
But some of these laser companies that specialize in tattoo removal, they'll be able to assess up front, this is what this looks like, so we'll just let you know what you're getting into.
Got it.
So
it's so interesting too, that sort of like market race or evolution that's happening, like you're saying. It's like, it almost reminds me of like viruses and vaccinations, where it's like, well, this is better ink because it looks cooler, but it's metallic or it's higher concentrated. And then you're like, okay, well, our technology might not be up to snuff to like get that out if it's completely different. So
and the glow in the dark inks, that's another one that people
have you removed tattoos from people who have glow in the dark?
We don't touch those usually because that goes in that metallic ink category.
Different.
So these beautiful vibrant blues and some of these colors, they'll turn to a dingy brown sometimes, and you're stuck with that for maybe up to 11 treatments, and then finally it will start to break down. But again, it's the level of the client saying, I want this off at all costs. And I have some of those people. I want it off. I don't care what it looks like. It's got to go.
Yeah.
Or this person was a bad person that put this tattoo on. I want it off.
Yeah.
So there's lots of factors. Yeah.
And on that note too, I guess a couple more questions for you before we wrap, but what is like the typical, and I'm sure it varies by type of tattoo, person, skin type, but what's the typical like recovery? I know you said like 6 to 8 weeks between treatments, but are you said blistering, like is there aftercare you recommend for a post-treatment?
Yes, we do all that. And also it's important, just like microneedling or anything else, you don't want to be on sometimes vitamin D, fish oils that can cause any blood thinning. You don't want to drink alcohol the day after. A lot of people have their tattoos put on with alcohol.
Yep.
It's amazing to me that nobody takes it off with the alcohol too. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It is more uncomfortable than putting it on. It is. It's more intense.
We've interviewed several people who have tattoos under the influence, and some of them actually still like their tattoos like years on, and some of them are like probably going to visit you in the near future to get those taken off.
So to answer that, if you've got like a black tribal tattoo with this deep, like your shirt red, like a tattoo
like
of
dark
like your
lines,
shirt.
maybe.
Yes,
like
and imagine like that red mixed in.
Yeah,
red always can blister, especially like getting into treatment 4 and stuff. And we have to be really sporadic with how you pace it, because some really colorful tattoos will do one wavelength, one treatment, one wavelength, another treatment if they're overlapping. If you can separate them out, we might treat them individually.
Gotcha.
But that forearm, that is not fun. That's pretty pigmented there. Was it ever touched up?
No, I actually just got this 2 months ago, and it's fresh, but it's also, and Ty and John at Tat-Stories know this too, but like a lot of my tattoos I'm try to be as intentional as possible. I have no intentions of removing any of them. So I'm committed. I'm locked in.
They're well done. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you for chatting with us, Christina. I do want to ask one more question before we let you go. Is there any tattoo that someone has come into your office and you've had to remove that sticks out as like absolutely ridiculous, or like the craziest one you've seen, one that made you laugh, like anything like you think about, you're like, oh my God, I'm glad you're getting this.
I could seriously write a book.
You got a couple like top 3 maybe?
So many. There's stories. So one of my favorite ones was a guy that lost like 150 pounds, and he was probably over 350, and all of his buddies were a bigger size, and they went out to a cabin one day and they decided we're all going to tattoo each other with a side profile of a big obese lady. And you know how people do side profiles? They're really bad. Like lip, nose. And they all had one on their upper back, and it was really bad and really thick. And so I got to be part of, like, he was texting all his buddies, I'm going first. And I get a lot of those, like, hey, because, everyone one had a lightsaber on her finger. Like, everyone's like, hey, I'm getting mine off, or I can't tell him. There's that one. There's so many. I'm trying to think.
That's crazy.
Give me a moment.
And I'm sure too, like, it's so interesting. We talk to people who have all different influences of like why they got their tattoo, but I'm sure like you kind of are hearing like the end of that story and being like, well, this is why I got it, and then this is why I want it off. Maybe they tell you, maybe they don't.
The other one that's really gratifying is a couple of our guys coming out of prison wanting a new fresh start, and a lot of them put these. You get to know the person, and they're sweet sweet men, and they're got these really, really intimidating tattoos.
Yeah.
You know, you see the rosary on the, one had horns and devil signs.
Like on his head?
On his head.
Oh, wow.
Horns on his head.
That sounds
with
painful.
numbers, and was the sweetest, kindest person. And he would win our drawing all the time for free removal because we really were rooting for him. And this was 6 years ago, a while ago, but that's one that we worked on for a long time.
Yeah.
And it felt good to get that removed for him. So people are trying to start a new chapter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to hear the fact that they're trusting me with some of these stories and what they've been through, it's special.
Yeah, and I'm sure brings probably a lot of meaning to your work. And like you said, you're going for multiple sessions, so you get to know these people. In a very similar vein, I think, a lot of the people at Tat-Stories that we interview, we only talk to once or twice, but there are a lot of them that we actually keep in contact with. Some of the stories we've heard of why people get tattoos, and like just being able to share that kind of perspective of everyone's art is different, whether you keep it for the rest of your life or not. It's, a story about you. It's a representation of your beliefs and it's self-expression. And that's kind of like what we build our community around.
And I don't have one tattoo on my body, but I'm an artist. I sing and dance too.
Yeah.
So it's an art to me that they're sharing.
Absolutely.
And some of this artwork is amazing.
Awesome.
And now I can go up to anyone and be like, oh my gosh, how are you working? And I can tell if people are getting it removed too. It's like opened a whole other part of, just conversation with people.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
That's so
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Christina, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Blu Coller Ink. For those of you watching, make sure if you have any questions, if you ever want to reach out to Christina or the folks at Tat-Stories and learn more about tattoo removal, go ahead and leave us a comment and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much. Take care.